in this research digest, we tried to be, based on the feedback we got last time, we tried to focus on two mechanisms, implementable mechanisms. But before we started to deep dive into the new mechanisms we would like to explore, we did a quick recap on research cycle number 1, because we had 2 different kind of output papers. So we tried to provide an overview of kind of what we had researched in the first cycle, defining DAOs basically as either a non-state actor from an international relations perspective, we proposed a few mechanisms that would be relevant to explore in identifying types of DAOs. And then from the Curve Labs perspective, kind of the metaphor was talking about DAOs as islands. And they focused on one mechanism, which we are exploring today more in detail, which is the conditional tokens framework. And we had to kind of get rid of a few research avenues we were going down, like exploring power structures. These are things we will cover in a future research digest or the institutional economics perspective. But now I would like to hand over kind of to deep dive really into implementable mechanism design of kind of recurring system patterns, one of which would be the proposal inverter, which can be useful for various of funding mechanisms. Yeah. So Jeff, would you like to deep dive on that?
Yeah, totally. So that was some of the feedback that we got from the PrimeDAO community in research cycle 1. Was an interest in implementable mechanisms. So a lot of the work we did in the first research cycle would be sort of here in the basic research or the applied research area. Of course, we've been collaborating with Curve Labs, who's been doing steady development research on the Gnosis conditional tokens framework. But in research cycle 2, we aim to focus more, as Shermin mentioned, on the development and operation side for researching implementable primitives that can make DAO2DAO interactions more smooth and more prevalent. So we started this section out. We've identified a whole bunch of kind of DAO2DAO interaction patterns. As we talked about in the first research digest, we tried to compare and contrast these with existing organizational joint ventures and equity swaps and all sorts of different ways that these collaborations already exist within institutions in the real world. And we're not trying to reinvent the wheel here. We're trying to look at what works in the real world and use what works and also fix what doesn't in this new institutional framework. So we laid out in section 2 here, there's a whole bunch of different mechanisms that we kind of covered at the surface level and looked at some examples in the DAO space and also examples in real world institutions. And then we dove a bit deeper into what we really see as the early or the biggest gains from DAO2DAO interactions. And one of those was the co-funding of research, and the other was joint ventures more in general. So how do DAOs share funds? How do DAOs cooperate? How do DAOs trust each other? This is kind of the conditional tokens framework is a way that DAOs can commit funds and trust that each DAO is going to commit the funds without, being the one that pays for the endeavor and then everyone else pulls out. It's kind of the Byzantine generals problem all over again. So yeah, some really interesting areas that we dove into. And as a more particular, more specific joint venture is the co-funding of research. So one of the things that we've realized as a research team and working among multiple DAOs is sometimes it's difficult to gather the funds required for longer research periods, especially when everyone's looking for implementable primitives and being able to make DAOs more interoperable. There's kind of these deeper research cycles that get thrashed in the interest of producing development developing primitives. So yeah, Jem, Max, anything else to add on the high level before we dive into these primitives in particular?
Maybe not to add, but just conversationally about the subject. I feel like these type of it depends on a perspective of long-termism or termism, you know, whatever, extermism, and then the policy you generate for these interactions, you know, with contractors or your members or your citizens or whatever. Different types of policies have to be implemented in order to create that type of long-termism, which yields, you know, not like a gig, but yields something that is sort of nourishing and building. And I think we're going to also come maybe on the market versus firm dichotomy to that a little bit, because, you know, firms try to optimize for this, like, you know, you seal the contract and you shut out the noise, and now, you know, full flexibility, and that is the transaction cost being reduced, right? And I think your chart has everything to do with that, like the chart that we have prepared for showing what is the components of a research cycle, how do which parts are productive, which parts are bureaucratic, and, you know, obviously how to design that timescape that majority of that is productive.
Yeah, and maybe to just enhance what Jem was saying, I think the focus was on how can we find mechanisms that are flexible and cater to the needs of specific collaborations without creating new institutions such as a DAO. So how can we keep the space flexible, but have reliable interaction patterns?
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. I can't count the number of times that we gather a bunch of people from different organizations and different DAOs and talk about, you know, a specific collaboration, and then someone in the group says, "Should we make a DAO for this?" And it's wonderful that we have this kind of instant organizational deployment tools with DAOs, but there is still some overhead in, you know, aggregating community, aggregating consensus, deciding what tools you're using, and if every time a new collaboration comes out, you have a new DAO, we're going to continue accruing this overhead, especially the attention overhead for participating in DAOs, which is really one of the areas we're aiming to cut down on for for contractors participating in multiple DAOs, is that they don't have to, you know, keep up with every proposal, keep up with every vote, keep up with everything going on, especially because these DAOs kind of fractalize in terms of initiatives that are going on, and just looking at the attention costs and the transaction costs in working with DAOs is very real in that sense. So with that, we're happy to introduce that one of the first mechanisms we chatted about is this proposal inverter mechanism. And the whole idea behind this is to kind of switch the onus of or the burden of proof from the contractor to the DAO or the community in general. And the idea behind this tool is that, you know, rather than people collaborating to support a DAO, DAOs can collaborate to support their contributors, even between multiple DAOs and multiple initiatives running at the same time. So the idea, you know, today we have DAOs with proposals in them. Each proposal can be considered like a bucket. You know, these buckets fill up with funds or conviction in the case of the Common Stack or OneHive, and then the proposal executes and the team goes. We propose this as sort of an inverter tool so that rather than proposals within a DAO, you can have multiple DAOs collaborating on a proposal. So you could have multiple DAOs feeding, for example, a bonding curve research team that's producing open outputs for all of the, you know, AMMs that are currently in the market. We see some of these kinds of initiatives going on in the CAD community, for example. Sorry, was there a question? No, sorry. Yeah, so the whole idea behind this is to give contractors back their time rather than, you know, a lot of these boundaries of the firm, like, you know, scoping a task or, you know, doing payroll management, all of these things are currently kind of siphoned to the contracting team. So you have to scope out your task. You have to convince the community that it's worthwhile. Then you have to hire subcontractors, task out their work. You have to review their work. You have to bring your work back to the DAO and justify all of all of that for your next proposal round. And all of this eats away at productive work time of contracting teams, which compounds when you're working. I mean, within one DAO, it's fine, but then when you work within 2, within 3, within 5, all of a sudden your overhead really expands, and your ability to do that deep work reduces. So the whole idea behind this primitive is to make more flows. So having the recurring funding flows on behalf of multiple DAOs, and also semi-automated payment flows to your contributors. So this is the basis behind the proposal inverter mechanism, is that it's a pool of funds. There can be DAO negotiated joint ventures. This wouldn't have to be funded, for example, all by PrimeDAO. Maybe PrimeDAO, the Token Engineering Commons, and MolluckDAO enter into a conditional token agreement, which we'll talk about more in a moment, that if everyone pays the funds into this, the initiative is a go. Now there's this pool of funds that allocates on a regular basis, and this can be a contractor negotiated allocation policy, maybe 5% of this pool every month, or say $5,000 per month, however you want to set it, flows out through semi-automated payment flows to these subcontractors. And essentially this proposal inverter mechanism is it's creating sort of a generalized automated contractor role, and allowing the actual contributors to be sort of subcontractors to this smart contract system. So it can help to automate some of the payment flows, create persistent initiatives. So it's not just, okay, this research initiative is a 2-month PrimeDAO Workcycle. Maybe it is a year research initiative that PrimeDAO is contributing to the Token Engineering Commons. Any number of DAOs or individual contributors could pay in as well. Maybe I'll stop here and ask if there's any questions so far. There may be a few more points to cover, but just wanted to open up the floor if there are any questions or comments. Cool. Well, I'll keep walking through this, and I'm sure we'll have some stuff by the end. So actually, we talk about mechanisms and primitives. So primitives can kind of be stacked into assemblages, and a mechanism is kind of a more like something can be a primitive or an assemblage. All of them are mechanisms. So we can have more sophisticated mechanisms as we go up. So actually, this proposal inverter tool is sort of a series of stacked primitives. So we went through a couple of them just to talk about some of this basic functionality, and then how we can combine that functionality for more interesting mechanisms down the line. So kind of the most basic here is the flow wallet, which is a term that came up in our research. And it's basically, rather than having wallets as like stocks where money goes and then sits, it's kind of treating them like flows. Like it's like wallets as pipes. There are already some tools that do this type of that offer this type of functionality, and we're not proposing to rebuild it from scratch. We're just proposing to look at what exists out there and make use of that in the right context to solve our DAO2DAO frictions. So the idea behind a flow wallet, we have this Squirtle, this kind of level 1, is sort of like a simple fund splitter. And also looking at kind of the electrical engineering analogies, we have splitter circuits. So the current, the voltage that comes in, split, and goes to a number of different components, which we can kind of bring in the corollary here with contractors. The second primitive is rate limiting those flow wallets. So rather than all of the power flowing in, flowing out, or all of the funds flowing in, flowing out, we actually integrate a leaky integrator. So this, you can consider it like a hole with a bucket in the bottom, or a dam. It aggregates water on one side and it rate limits the outflow on the other side. So you can have sort of expectation over predictable financial flows. So it's not just, are we funded this month? We don't know. We can see there is enough funds within this structure to fund our initiative for another 3 months, et cetera, et cetera. And the funds flow out and are allocated to contributors per the allocation policy. The third mechanism, and this is a little bit future box, it's a rate limited dynamic allocation flow wallet. So we have the flow wallet, we have the rate limited aspect, and now we're adding in a dynamic allocation. So for multiple contractors, I mean, if it's a group of 3 or 4 contractors, it's easy to say, okay, Max, Jem, Shermin, and myself are going to split, 25% of the income equally. That's cool. That's easy. But once we start to get into more complex arrangements with subcontractors and subcontractors, we probably need some form of dynamic allocation of those profits, which can be handled quite easily through a simple bonding curve interface. And I know we talk about bonding curves, and it's, that's a rabbit hole topic all on its own. But essentially, all a bonding curve is you stake something for access for a token. So let's say the bonding curve controls the revenue share from this pool. So if I put funds into this bonding curve, I get a token out, and that token is a access right to a portion of the revenue. So this opens up much more fluid contractor arrangements. So when contractors join or leave, they can purchase or sell from the bonding curve. And this also allows very interesting higher level dynamics to come along where you can have almost stakers. So if there was, for example, VCs out there who really like the work that Curve Labs is doing, great, they can purchase some of those tokens and stake on the performance of the Curve Labs research team, for example, and perhaps even earn a portion of that revenue stream. So this is very interesting. This is the delegator role in the graph. This is basically a way people can stake on good validators in that network. So we're just kind of borrowing that concept and bringing it into the human realm and saying, well, why can't people stake on a good research team and earn some of the revenue that's going to or coming from that initiative? So it really opens up kind of some higher level dynamics and potential for more signaling from other network actors as to the benefits and the value coming out of these kinds of research initiatives.
And there's
some CAD. Yeah.
Just something interesting to, I mean, I don't know if we are pretty on time, right? Like we have plenty of time.
We still have 30 minutes, I think. Yeah.
So just to open this up a bit, like I think I found one of our conversations quite interesting when we were having nostalgia about early bonding curve days, and sort of also this reflection that bonding curves compared to the AMMs, like it never picked up, and like sort of the diagnose never picked up. Obviously it's like a time capped argument, but I think the problem at the time was that the difficulty in parameterizing a banking structure, even though the infrastructure was there, to build the interface for it, to trivialize the deployment of an economic system, it wasn't clear to us, the builders, to even explain to these various economic contexts that we were wanting to deploy these things. So I think the liquidity pool, in its ignorant bliss, it's a much more interactable thing. And obviously there are complexities there, but like you encounter them in terms of impermanent loss and so on, and then you learn as you go. But bonding curves are not necessarily like that, right? So I just wanted to like open that up. Maybe like this type of architecture already, the template already provides you with that abstraction, and you don't have to get lost in that forest for every use case. I think this type of infrastructuralization is very relevant for consumption or utilization.
Totally. Yeah, totally. And I think, I mean, bonding curves have been huge lately. A lot of the time, they go under AMMs. Actually, there's more research to be done here, because I think we really need to do a better job separating the definition of primary market automated market makers and secondary market automated market makers, and most of the AMMs out there are secondary market AMMs. In other words, you mint the token in a contract over here, you take some of that liquidity and you put it into a liquidity pool. So you put in 2 assets or 3 assets in balancer pools and whatnot, and then it creates a liquidity pool token out of that. Now that is the supply asset that we're talking about a lot of the time with our primary market AMMs, and the augmented bonding curve and the common stack is a primary market automated market maker. In other words, you put in DAI and you get out the supply asset, as opposed to putting in the 2 reserves and getting out an LP token, which is kind of the secondary market AMM. But I definitely agree. I think a lot of what slowed down the adoption of the primary market bonding curve as a raise tool, which actually is going to be going live in the Token Engineering Commons probably next month, which is super exciting. I would be happy to chat more with you guys about that. But I think a lot of the slowdowns there are regulatory and yeah, I mean, if you're talking about putting millions of dollars in smart contracts, you need audits, you need regulatory legal considerations, like what organization is doing this raise. When we're talking about the bonding curve in this, like the rate limited flow wallet, I think the interface can be vastly simplified, because this isn't a contract that's going to be holding millions of dollars or being the core bud of a native token economy. This is just a very small bonding curve contract that controls revenue sharing for this proposal or for this specific initiative. So if we launched a rate limited dynamic allocation flow wallet for the D2D initiative, there may be 6 to 10 people interacting with it. So not nearly the level of sophistication. We're not expecting to underpin a whole economy with this native token. It just gives you the rights access to a certain portion of that revenue stream. And I think that's where that's going to get really interesting, when we can unitize these products. So it's not like the bonding curve. You have to know umpteen things about bonding curves and participate in a legal crowd sale and so on and so forth. It's just, oh, this thing controls that thing. Cool. I'm going to put some funds in there. I get an access that controls that thing. Great. And I think we're going to start to see this simplification of these tools coming soon.
And also, like, the size is not an issue here, in the sense that, like, you can have a small interaction space which is demanded by a lot of communities and whatnot, and that justifies the audit cost, which also is kind of negligible in face of such public value. But yes, that was
definitely. And I think
if you want to go on.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So yeah, a couple of the benefits of this tool is that it can provide persistent cross-DAO semi-automated payments infrastructure. So we don't have to, today, if we wanted to get funding for DAO2DAO Research for multiple DAOs, we would have to submit a proposal to PrimeDAO, we would have to submit a proposal to the Token Engineering Commons, we would have to submit another one to Moloch, and all the overhead involved. So this is kind of creating a persistent cross-DAO payment infrastructure. It doesn't actually have to change the structure of the DAO itself. We don't have to launch another DAO to do it. It's just kind of like a payment extension for the DAO that can plug in and serve as sort of like a decentralized HR almost, bringing some of those functionalities back into DAO ecosystems. Of course, we can use this to fund shared research initiatives. One of the most prominent that we chatted about was, AMMs and bonding curves. There's still so much more R&D. There's tons of research going into it, but a lot of it is private. It's paid, and it's paid for by moneyed interests who are looking to develop the next Uniswap type thing. We posit that this research is much more valuable open and in the open source commons, and that's where we'd like to continue doing that research. In discussion of this primitive, it also came up that this would be a great way to support community management and care work, and any roles that aren't well suited by the kind of KPI-based checkbox labor. It's easier to say to a developer team who's looking to produce a specific component, you lay out your roadmap, you say we have to hit these tasks, and then we do. That's great. But there are different kinds of work, for example, community management or research, where it takes a lot of time just to figure out what there is to be done. And having that overhead constantly eats away at your productive time that you're able to actually support the community or do that care work. So interesting that this proposal Inverter could help to recognize and support kind of that invisible care work and community work in different DAOs. A tool like this would also allow for kind of this squad specialization that would bring economies of scale to DAOs. So you can have, it's cool to see these kind of squads spin up in different DAO ecosystems, and being able to have DAOs share these skilled squads, whether that's community management or DevOps or anything that all of these DAOs have in common. We all need a website, we all need a Discord, we all need the technical side of things. So having that squad specialization and then allowing DAOs to share and cross support these squad specialists would be a big win in our opinion. Also, another really great example that came up in our research discussions, actually, Ata, did he come back? Yeah, if you want to speak a bit more on this, Ata, feel free. But this was about two different DAOs or protocols launching collective liquidity pools, for example, to incentivize liquidity for a stable coin. Really interesting stuff. And yeah, again, kind of that higher level functionality, how we can collaborate as DAOs for mutual benefit. Ata, did you have anything further to add here?
Yeah, I was thinking that since now we are seeing, for example, a lot of the launch of a lot of stable coins, and they're all trying to tap into the meta curve pools. At the same time, some of those new stablecoin DAOs are very close to each other, and there is this feeling of need for coordination and collaboration. And one of the most obvious ways of doing that seems to be creating a shared meta pool connection to the curve, and then incentivizing liquidity for both of the stable coins by combining their liquidity rewards, so that they can both collaborate, achieve better capital efficiency, issue less than they need to in terms of their tokens, and thus boost liquidity for both of their stable coins. And maybe the proposal inverter and this contract mechanism proposed there could be a way for achieving that.
Yeah, and actually,
right. So no, go ahead, Jem.
Thank you. The beginning of this research was very much with common liquidity pools in mind. I think the added perspective here is to take it towards stable coins, because stable coins, there is this thesis for a meta stable coin where there's this meta stability that you achieve through diversification of potential break of pegs and so on. So makes a lot of sense. We need someone to do biz dev on that.
Yeah, absolutely. And this, yeah, just to bring it back to the diagram, a lot of this, why we break it up into primitives is that a lot of this can be swapped out for other pieces. So these don't have to be a trusted contractor squad or a research team at the bottom. This can be a liquidity pool that this is paying into. And of course, the rate limiting is a contractor or DAO negotiated policy. So if you want to change the amount that's flowing in or change where it's flowing from, these don't have to be DAOs. These can be individuals co-funding a collective liquidity pool. So that the tool is much more composable with different modular primitives stacked. So that's why we're looking at it as stacked primitives, because you can take one primitive out and swap in another and get a completely different functionality of this kind of primitive. So that's why we see the modularity and the stacking is really important. Cool, thanks for that, Atta. Yeah, and then we close just saying this is early days for this type of research. You know, a lot of the terminology, even we went back and forth. You know, is it a proposal inverter? Is this too like engineering? Why don't we talk more about like the benefits to people? But again, we're kind of looking at this still on a very deep research layer. We've identified a bunch of tools, are all out, you know, with various levels of this functionality, whether it's fund streaming or fund splitting. But yeah, there's a lot of interesting direction for future research here, and yeah, we're really interested to hear the feedback of the Prime community, and yeah, if there's any thoughts or feedback, we're happy to discuss it now or in the Discord later. And yeah, unless there are any questions now, I'm happy to turn over the conditional tokens discussion to Jem and Max.
I have a brief question. Oh, sorry. You go first. Thank you. I think I missed the beginning of the presentation, so forgive me if this is something that you covered early on. But my question would be specifically about how you intend to interface with different DAO, completely different DAO infrastructures. So say Moloch, which has a very specific permissionless and trustless structure, with say DAO2DAO. I think that's going to be kind of the make or break of this mechanism, is maintaining the trustless structures on the sides of the DAOs that interface with it.
I think that's the perfect segue to the next section, because there we will dive into the mechanism, and there's definitely, hopefully, something that addresses object orientation, interoperability, and so on.
Awesome. Efficiency, let's go.
Totally. Awesome.
Can I also ask a question?
Prego.
So you were talking about venture capitals even having the possibility of funding these like research initiatives, and that tapping into the revenue from that output. Could you talk more about how do you think of connecting a revenue stream to a research output that is funded by like multiple DAOs? Is it an agreement that they make in the beginning? How do they claim ownership over that output? And I don't know, because I was also thinking of this R&D initiative as more of where some of the competitors in the space can come together to fund research from which they will benefit at the end together. But because of their market position, they're not really going to share the revenue. Yeah.
Right.
Well,
yeah. So sorry, go ahead, Jem.
No, go ahead, Jeff.
I was just going to put in the quick point that with regards to revenue generation, is probably less on the like research initiative side, but trying to keep this as general as possible. There could be, for example, a squad that's putting out you know, smart contracts or code that can be productized or, you know, turned into a subscription, and revenue streams coming from that. The revenue generating, so this is primarily the looking at like the graphs delegator role. So you have revenues, and the delegators actually earn a share of those revenues based on choosing. They're providing an ecosystem service. They're pointing to you know, the productive resources in this ecosystem. So if it were to get to a scale where this tool would be useful at the kind of the signaling level for pointing out which teams are producing value in the ecosystem, there could be the potential for revenue at some point in the future. I don't think there's a direct correlation with the research team that or the research team context that we've been discussing this in.
I think
Did you have something more to add
like,
there, Tim?
Yeah, just revenue maybe belongs to a certain context that we might be overly inquisitive in a completely new medium. So yeah, it makes sense to sort of rethink all of those things. Then I think, Jeff, you made a pretty good point that, you know, the projects that these research informs and the products that it will sort of walk on to creep towards. I think, especially in the crypto space and the way value is created, exploded in crypto space, is you have to be there early, and research is even pre-early. So like if there's a moment, an epoch where in the decentralized community these things make sense, they are interesting, these entities produce valuable research, it's trivial that entities that are analogous to, for example, Power Pool, that airdrop governance tokens to other communities because they are a community, these research entities are going to get airdrops from communities that want their attention, basically. So if you are a stakeholder in this thing, maybe it's not revenue, but you will, is airdrop a revenue? I don't know. I don't want to even talk about it. But if you're a staker in this, you will, you are in the squad, right? Like that is sort of, of course you can change the definition of what is your community standards of staking. Do you approve people? Do you completely decapitalize it? That's up to you. But here it's like sort of a generalized model of, a new type of interaction between, let's say, market firms, which we think DAOs are coming close to expressing, versus auxiliaries that are, hanging around, picking up their signals and taking them towards success, higher consciousness, care, execution, and whatnot.
Just to add maybe, or try to answer your question from a different perspective. So I think what you were asking is like, who decides like what a potential revenue share will be? So apart from the fact of maybe us needing to identify or maybe revenue needs to have a new definition in the Web3, right? But I think it's a two-sided thing. So researchers, if it's about funding research, researchers could get together and define a mechanism, and they then could attract investors to opt in, whether it's institutional investors, DAOs, or private entities, or a few investors or DAOs could come together, decide on a mechanism that makes sense to them, and a revenue share, or however you want to, a monetization possibility of that research, and decide on the mechanism. So, but the important thing is the mechanism in itself, not needing its own entity, or using a mechanism that doesn't need an institution. But the parameters of the mechanism, and I think this would be down the line, further research would have to flow into standardized mechanism patterns that we can use for different purposes. Thanks, does that answer the question? Yeah.
Yeah.
Awesome. So should we continue into the conditional tokens?
Yeah, I actually have a bit of a presentation about our prototype. So if I think I already have share screen privileges. Oh no, sorry. I think you need to stop, Jeff, before I can share. There we go. All right.
Go ahead.
So, okay. Everyone see that? Yeah, so this is DAO2DAO cycle 2. And what I'm going to do is I want to go through so the primitive that we've been working with, or I've been prototyping with this cycle, which is the conditional tokens framework, and then also look at like the mechanism that we prototyped, which is basically how to trustlessly co-fund a joint venture between two DAOs. And so let me just, okay, so a brief overview of the conditional tokens framework. So it was originally designed by Gnosis to enable deeper combinatorial prediction markets, which on a high level basically means that this framework allows for the transfer of an ERC20 asset on the occurrence of a certain event. So in another way, you could essentially see it as a tokenized escrow outcome. And there are two different kind of conditions. So you could have a shallow condition with either a binary or a scalar outcome. So a question such as, will the price of ETH be above 2K on the 12th of March at midnight? And then you can have deeper conditions, which are kind of conditions, nested conditions based on each other, which I have a diagram of somewhere here. So, you know, this, can you see my mouse? Or, okay, great. So, you know, this is our kind of shallow layer condition. So we have the question, and then we have two positions. And then we have a deeper condition, which is based on the outcome of the shallow one, right? So yeah, so then why this is a particularly powerful primitive for DAO2DAO is that we can then create collateral-backed conditions, the outcome of which can decide whether or not this collateral can actually be redeemed by the DAOs or by another party. And so our joint venture prototype basically involves three stages. So we have two DAOs agree on a co-funding proposal. Via the conditional tokens framework, a Gnosis safe is funded with conditional tokens, and this Gnosis safe can then redeem these conditional tokens for the underlying collateral which was supplied by each DAO. So what this looks like on a technical level is two different smart contracts. We have what I'm currently dubbing as a treasury smart contract. So this was primarily created because one of the disadvantages of the conditional tokens framework is that it is an ERC 1155 token. So it is not particularly backwards compatible with existing contracts that don't implement certain ERC 1155 specific functions. And so this treasury was kind of a get around for this, and it then allows DAOs to interface with conditional tokens, and this treasury will hold conditional tokens for the DAOs. So it's, yeah. And then there's simply just an oracle as well, which is an oracle checking the balance of the joint venture at a given time, which is fairly self-explanatory. And as we kind of detailed in the research digest, we have split up the overall process of a DAO2DAO collaboration into two stages. So this is the stage which actually is kind of not Web3 reliant. This is fairly socially reliant, and so, you know, it's again what you would kind of expect. So you have probably members of two DAOs, although theoretically it could be just people who are interested in the development of Prime and Gnosis, but weren't actually members, who write a proposal. Some kind of final version is reached between them. And then something that we've also been mocking up in this cycle and wireframing is the creation of what we're calling a negotiation interface, where basically this would be a portal for parameterizing and also storing proposals for DAO2DAO collaboration. So basically you would put in the proposal information, and this would then this interface would then parameterize it and then upload it to IPFS and act in the same way that DAO front ends have, you know, a proposal history. This would essentially act as that as well. And there are various agreement parameters in there that are kicked out after this process. So this is our stage one negotiation phase. And this is a flow diagram of the second stage, which is the agreement stage, and this is where the smart contracts come in. So the first step here is that, you know, we're imagining this proposal is kind of been agreed by the members, the people who are writing it. So both DAOs, sorry, my cat just decided to enter the chat as well. So yeah, you have a situation where then, okay, so both DAOs internally vote on whether they should do this proposal, whether this seems good to each member of the DAO. And if so, then they create and split an initial shallow level condition. So something that looks like this. So we have a question. So will DAO2 fund the joint venture? And with conditional tokens, what you do is you split these conditions. So you actually have outcome tokens that represent both outcomes of this question. So you have tokens that would represent no and would also represent yes. And then depending on what happens in the future, some of these tokens will be able to be redeemed for collateral and other ones will be worthless, essentially. And one of the other things that I was using for this was the multi-call generic scheme from DAO2DAO, which enables kind of multiple calls to be stacked on top of each other. So if this goes through, then what happens is the DAOs or representatives of each DAO swap information regarding the conditions that now exist. And then another decision is made whether to create deeper positions and co-fund the joint venture. So what this then looks like is you now have these nesting conditions that have started to come. And because of the way that the conditional tokens framework works, you need to, because deeper conditions will always redeem kind of up the chain. So in terms of how you actually create the questions, you need to kind of flip it around from what you would maybe think. So you need to say, will the other DAO do it? And will we do it as well? Kind of thing. Yeah. So then the DAOs then also, once they've done this, they transfer the conditional tokens that represent the yes, both DAOs fund it tokens to the joint venture itself. And this is just a Gnosis safe that I mocked up on Rimpy. So then, yeah, from there, the Gnosis safe can interact with the treasury contract after the oracle has reported. Sorry, that's actually something I missed. So yeah, as this is already happening, you have an oracle which has a time lock. And after a time lock comes up, the oracle essentially checks the balance of the joint venture to check that there are the number of conditional tokens in it that should be. And because with a co-funding, we're talking about a binary outcome here. So we had to have a no. For some reason, the DAOs didn't fund it. And so the DAOs then, even though there's no joint venture, the DAOs can actually then redeem the conditional tokens representing the situation where it didn't happen. So they don't actually lose money. Funds are always actually recoverable by them. And yeah, if the oracle says, yes, it did happen, then the joint venture can redeem the conditional tokens for the underlying collateral, and you have your happy little money smiley face guy. So I'm just aware of time, so I'll kind of skip through some stuff. So the advantages of conditional tokens in this, to create a mechanism like this is, yeah, so as I've already said, DAOs can recover their side of the co-funding in the case that the other DAO doesn't actually follow through. So there's really like the, yeah, which then obviously puts a lot of pressure onto the creation of a trustless oracle. But that is something that is mechanically quite easy. And also there are numerous, there's a lot of activity within the space of people creating oracles at the moment as well. So that's something that is not a roadblock. But on a kind of a deeper level, conditions and subconditions don't always have to be created or decided at the same time. So, I already said before that you can imagine the conditional tokens as a tokenized escrow outcome. And so the question kind of arises of, okay, why not just use an escrow smart contract, right? And in this way, conditional tokens and this kind of mechanism is sort of a microcosm of what was being discussed before, where you don't need to make a new DAO every time DAOs interact. And this is kind of a similar thing. You don't need to make a new escrow contract every time you just want a condition to be created, which is reliant on the actions of two DAOs, right? Because you can then just create conditional tokens for it, which is obviously far more gas efficient. There's a far lower coordination overhead because this is a contract that's already deployed. And so it's really just making some function calls. And just for the wider ecosystem, it also reduces the amount of bloat on chain as well, because you don't have single-use escrow contracts that are then just left on chain. And they also allow for a certain amount of nuance to be brought into these kind of collaboration proceedings as well, because as they are just tokens, they could be transferred around. So for instance, even though like these tokens could be used, for example, as a form of prepayment for another team that could then be redeemed on them actually on, for instance, a joint venture being funded and then making an interface, for instance. So it allows for a kind of a deeper kind of compostability for these negotiations to take place between two DAOs.
Especially that, for example, we were you were mentioning that the proposals don't even have to be written inside the DAO membrane, but it can actually be brought in from a certain imaginary, a certain interest, from outside the DAO to these DAOs, and still be maybe even more competitive than member-generated proposals.
Absolutely.
And, conditional tokens allows also the rewarding of such functions that are, we're taking this sort of like entrepreneurially to propose that. And the conditional tokens take into account.
Definitely. So the next steps. So, and this is kind of, I'm not sure who was speaking before when the question was how do you create something that's essentially agnostic with regards to how different DAO frameworks can interact with, and we were talking about the proposal inverter mechanism. And the first next step, which I'm actually already working on, is to reposition this treasury from being something that each DAO has to deploy itself and use that to interact with the conditional tokens contract to actually kind of, obviously people could deploy their own ones, but to basically have it where PrimeDAO will deploy this treasury interface contract and other DAOs can simply interact with that by calling it as they would any other smart contract. So this lowers coordination costs for other DAOs, and obviously is a kind of a service that's being provided to the ecosystem anyway, because this is the smart contract funnel that DAO2DAO collaborations can run through. This then does make that to an extent DAO platform agnostic, and it also opens up the possibility of this then providing some kind of a small fee model for PrimeDAO in the same way that liquidity pools have fees attached to them. Furthermore, this also opens it up to be used by stuff like multi-signature wallets, and kind of broadens basically anyone who wants to call a contract can use it. So it's really trying to turn it into a piece of common good infrastructure. After that, also just further develop on the Oracle and the fleshing out and the creation of the negotiation interface, which is something that I kind of briefly discussed and has been wireframed, but as of yet has not been devved on too much. And yeah, that's it. Thank you very much. Are there any immediate questions or anything that anyone would like me to clear up? I realize I may have been talking quite quickly because we've kind of hit time already.
Right on time.
Yeah, it was great. I really like that the agreements or negotiations don't have to be simultaneous. So it's almost like you can, like I'm picturing like a multilateral agreement where like every nation state in the world literally like puts their money on the table and says like, hey, this is, we are committed to, you know, mitigating our climate footprint or something. And when you have that on the table, and you say to the other nations, like, all you have to do is put yours on the table too, and then we are gonna like solve this problem together. I mean, this is kind of how it already goes in climate agreements, I imagine, but I'm just interested in that kind of like, your stake is on the table and all they have to do is put theirs on the table, and then this goes through.
There's a certain amount of interaction that, you know, it's kind of like a stepwise thing. So obviously, if you're making conditions that are reliant on the outcome of other conditions, and I'm doing this a lot, which, you know, is, I'll just go back to it. there has to be, those conditions have to actually already exist for this to happen. So, like if you're creating this condition, which is reliant on this, and say if this is the position of another DAO's condition, that obviously does have to exist. But yeah, exactly, it does make it far more fluid, because it's all that then in reality would turn into is like, okay, say at some point within the next week or 2 weeks, we know this vote's going to happen, and we just know that, after that, for instance, like me from Prime and you from CommonStack, then we can just kind of sync up and go, oh, has it happened yet? Yes, it has. And then it can happen again. So it's bringing it into a more like realistic way of how these collaborations build up and how you actually kind of start working together as well.
Yeah. Sort of segueing off what you just said about how to work together. I think that there could potentially be a lot of underlying assumptions in where does the weight of the kind of the bureaucratic coordination overheads kind of shift to in when using these kinds of mechanisms. I'm thinking of a use case, for example. Let's say that it's proposed that there's a joint venture to create a decentralized arts event or festival, and we open up and ask all DAOs to contribute something, but then kind of, as with any joint venture, they would only work well if it's kind of well defined as to where the decisions are coming from in a very granular fashion. Otherwise, it implodes into a huge bureaucratic coordination thing between DAOs, and that means between different kind of communities. So I'm wondering what kind of provisions could be made within the mechanism itself to streamline decision-making in an effective way while being decentralized.
I mean, I think that's definitely a very interesting, it's a very interesting question in a few ways. One, in that it's kind of slightly looking further ahead than what we were looking at with this, but also in terms, so, we were really looking at how you can kind of, I suppose, lay the ground for something that is kind of a smaller team, maybe from 2 DAOs, as well as something that has, and within that, say if you were going to be developing like a platform or some tool that is of use between both DAOs, that would then, you would have a kind of DevOps and a dev team and a project management team that was predefined within the arrangement or within the agreement that was then already voted on. And this was something that came up in one of the sessions. I think it was actually Michael, who isn't here, but he referred to the beginning of joint ventures as almost like trying to reach the begin. If you imagine them as a state machine, then what this mechanism does is it doesn't predetermine how the machine runs, but it allows you to get to the initial state that you desire for the state machine to run. So in a sense, this mechanism, I suppose, isn't necessarily looking at like this kind of like repeated longevity thing, but I think there's a lot that can already be predefined within the negotiation phase. So within the proposal that both DAOs kind of like ratify both internally and then create the conditions about, where you could predefine a lot of those roles, I think, that you're talking about. Does that answer your question?
Yeah.
Okay.
We're really looking forward to seeing the first use cases.
Thanks.
Yeah, and I think it's interesting that the proposal inverter and the conditional tokens framework actually fit into the same flows sometimes, because a lot of what we're trying to do here is not or is to empower smaller groups within a DAO to be like, and actually Pat mentioned this in his recent piece, Crypto Networks, I forget the title of it, but it's in the PrimeDAO channels, and it's about empowering smaller like autonomous groups within a DAO So it's kind of like these trusted squads, these like contractor groups. And I think that's part of, as Max said, that's part of the agreement parameters in one of his diagrams. It's a little small in the article, but you can see it in the Miro as well. That could be one of the agreements, is that, hey, we're going to have a joint venture and it's going to be run by this team of 10 people within the DAO. And they're, you know, they can break out however they want, communications, project management, etc. But having that sort of as a condition within those frameworks would be pretty cool.
You could almost imagine something like the proposal inverter mechanism actually being used to then fund the, you know, kind of fund the early stages of a joint venture that goes from, okay, we now have the joint venture, we have a team, all the way through maybe like POC, MVP stage or something like that, and then it stands on its own legs. You know, like and Jeff, you know, placed several points in his proposal inverter diagram where you could also use conditional tokens. So, you know, an amalgamation or a stacking of these mechanisms. So now we're getting, you know, stacks of stacks of stacks. Yeah, that, you know, you could quite easily imagine those two things being kind of put together, and then being able to firstly co-fund and then kind of financially support something all the way from an idea to, you know, an MVP, maybe.
It's interesting to me because a lot of these are almost like the same patterns we're looking at on the DAO level. We're now looking at them like within a DAO as well. So like a lot of these tools have sort of like fractal application.
Yeah, it's just fractals.
To larger groups and to smaller groups. Yeah. Cool stuff. Any final questions? I know we're 10 minutes over the hour already, so I actually have to run. But if there are any other questions, there is a DAO2DAO channel in the PrimeDAO Discord. So feel free. I've dropped a link to a couple of these pieces in there, and we can continue the conversation. And if there's more interest, we can definitely do another dive into some of these primitives, because we think they're really important for opening up the DAO interaction patterns for how we proliferate this space.
Cool. Well, thank you to everyone who's remaining here. I think besides James, everyone has been sort of researching or like project managing or pushing or designing for this project. But James, welcome to the family. Basically, you added your seasoned DAO perspectives to the conversation, and please stay with us.
Definitely.
Yeah.
Nice to see everybody here.
Thanks for the
Chat again soon.
Ciao, guys.
See you. Thank you, guys.